Now we know we are just under 35 days away before we fall off that cliff, which would lead to rising tax rates and deep spending cuts. I want to bring in Republican Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. Now, he was a member of the Deficit Reduction Super Committee last year. They failed to agree on a plan, but he's been talking about this issue for a long time. Good morning, Senator.
Morning, guys.
Let me first ask you your reaction to this. We just learned that President Obama will be traveling to your backyard on Friday to talk about the fiscal cliff in spending. He's traveling to Pennsylvania right now. Is this a welcome visit as far as you're concerned?
As far as I'm concerned, the President of the United States is always welcome in my state of Pennsylvania. So we welcome the President and look forward to his message. And I have some questions I'd like to, I hope he addresses.
What questions?
Well, first of all, you know, the President seems absolutely determined to inflict a tax increase on the American people. 2 years ago, he signed a bill that extended the current tax rates for 2 more years because he said the last thing you want to do is raise taxes in a weak economy. Today, the economy is weaker than it was 2 years ago. Why in the world does he want to inflict that damage now?
Senator,
second, well, I've got several others, but go ahead.
I'll get you one more in, then I'll ask you one.
Sure. Here's another one. If the President actually gets the tax increase that he says he wants, that solves 8% of the projected deficit over the next 10 years. What in the world is the President's plan for the other 92%? Is he going to raise taxes on the middle class? Is he going to raise taxes repeatedly? Does he have some, has he discovered the willingness to rein in spending? We haven't seen any plan.
All right, Senator, let's talk about you now, because a year ago, when you were part of the super committee, you did propose your own cut plan and revenue plan. This included closing loopholes. This included reducing deductions in taxes. Do you still support closing loopholes and reducing deductions?
Look, the concern that I have is that we are now just a few weeks away from a massive tax increase. And I am trying to find a way to avoid inflicting that damage on our economy and going through that. So if we're going to have some kind of revenue increase, which this President seems determined to do, I would hope we could at least do it in the way that does the least economic harm. That means lower marginal rates, reform the tax code, offset the lost revenue by reducing the deductions and write-offs and loopholes, that sort of thing. Then at least you could hope that you'd have some pro-growth policy in your tax code that would offset the damage done by greater revenue.
So that is a yes, though, just to be clear here. You would favor raising revenue by closing loopholes and reducing deductions?
If we were lowering marginal rates at the same time, lower than what we have today, and if we were going to do something meaningful about the actual problem we have, which is spending and which is the entitlement program.
Right. Agreed. The Democrats need to come along on the idea of spending cuts and talk about that in a serious way. Let's stipulate that. But would you be in favor of reducing deductions and closing loopholes without the corresponding rate cut?
No. Why? You know, I think that what we need to do, if we're going to do this, you know, the revenue side isn't where the problem lies in the first place. This is a sideshow to the real problem. The real problem that the President has refused to address. How are we going to put our entitlement programs on a sustainable path? How are we going to live within our means? Now, if we're going to do something on the revenue side, then for gosh sakes, let's at least not damage the economy any more than we have to. And so let's do it by lowering marginal rates and generating revenue through reducing the value of deductions and write-offs and loopholes, the kinds of things that distort economic activity.
Now, Warren Buffett yesterday wrote an interesting op-ed. He is a supporter of the president, but yesterday he said he does not favor raising the rates on people making $250,000, but he says he would support it for people making $500,000. Is there an income level where you would support, or at least not oppose virulently, the idea of raising rates? 500,000, a million, 10 million?
Again, I don't think that's a constructive direction to go in. We could just keep adding ever more brackets and ever more burdens on people who are productive or have a couple of good years in their business. I think all of that discourages economic growth and discourages risk-taking and discourages entrepreneurship. So I'm in favor of moving in the direction of a flatter tax system, fewer brackets, lower rates, simplicity where we get rid of all of the distortions that happen in the tax code, rather than speculating about how many different new brackets we should create.
One last question on taxes, because I do want to get to Benghazi. But on taxes, again, you've talked about closing loopholes and reducing deductions. Grover Norquist, in his pledge, says that would violate his pledge. Even those changes would violate his pledge. Are you okay violating the Grover Norquist pledge?
I don't intend to violate any pledge. My pledge is not to support higher taxes. What we're faced with in just a few weeks is a massive tax increase. If I can help ensure that we don't have that tax increase, then I believe I've fulfilled my pledge to fight for the lowest possible taxes.
He may have a disagreement there, but I do want to move on to Benghazi here, because today Susan Rice, the UN ambassador, is traveling to Capitol Hill to meet with 3 of her fiercest critics on the issue of Benghazi over the last several months. Do you think some of your Republican colleagues who've said they would block her nomination as Secretary of State, do you think they've been too hard on her?
Well, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I thought what I heard was that they would block it if they didn't hear an adequate explanation for why she went on national television repeatedly, many days after the attack in which 4 Americans were murdered, and she told a story that wasn't true. Now, maybe she has a good explanation for this, but we haven't heard it yet. And so I'm glad she's coming to Capitol Hill. Maybe it's possible for her to provide some information that we don't have now that would explain how this could happen, how the American people could have been so misled about the nature of this incident. So I welcome her visit and hope it's constructive.
If she is nominated, can you see herself supporting that nomination?
Again, it depends on whether we get some very clear and acceptable answers to these questions. How she could have gone on national television and told the American people that this was not related to a terrorist attack, when in fact senior people in our intelligence community knew almost from the very beginning that it very much was a terrorist attack. That's a disturbing fact pattern that we need to have addressed.
Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, great to talk to you this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Ahead on starting